psychological impact and the importance of speaking out and the role we all play in prevention and support. Let me say good afternoon to Miss Tashconnor Roach. Good afternoon. Welcome to the drive.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
All right, wonderful. You know, as we're having this conversation this afternoon, for some it might be an uncomfortable conversation. For some, it might bring up, um, you know, painful memories. But this afternoon, as we discuss, the aim is to help as it relates to prevention from somebody else falling victim. Let me ask you, Tashkana, from a psychological perspective, how would you define sexual abuse and why is it important for people to understand it clearly?
Alright, so for me, I would define sexual abuse as basically any unwanted sexual act or behavior towards somebody that it ultimately harms their physical, psychological, emotional, mental, social, and also their spiritual well being, right? And it's
Yeah.
very important for us to understand what it is because we need to call it out when it happens, and it also gives survivors a space to seek help without second guessing if what happened to them would fall under sexual violence. It's
Yeah.
also very important for us as a society to understand what it is so that we can slowly break down the barriers that are currently shielding this topic. As I mentioned
Yeah.
before, it's quite an uncomfortable topic. Some would say it's taboo to talk about it, but it's important for us to understand what it is clearly.
Yeah. Also on the line with me this afternoon is Miss Sasha Scott. Sasha, do you agree with that definition? And also, why do you think it's important for, let's say, victims to be able to speak up?
Thank you very much. I do agree with Tashkana's perspective because I truly believe that sexual abuse, it's any unwanted act or non-consensual sexual act or behavior where power, coercion, or manipulation is used to get to the victim and stuff like that. And so I really believe that it is important for people to understand it clearly. As
Yeah.
a nation, it's something that we must understand because many people are suffering from this. Many people are experiencing this, and so many harmful behaviors are often minimized. They're misunderstood by people, and so when we have a clearer understanding of it, we're better able to recognize abuse. We're able to support the survivors appropriately, and we're able to challenge the harmful beliefs that allow these things to continue.
Yeah. Still with you, what are some of the short-term or long-term psychological effects sexual abuse can have on a victim?
Okay, so in the short term, victims of sexual abuse, they may experience shock. They may experience fear, confusion, anxiety, as well as feelings of shame, feelings of guilt, and they may also have difficulty sleeping or concentrating on various tasks.
Yeah.
Now, in the long term, the effects can be more complex, including conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety disorders, and difficulties with trust and relationships. And so some individuals may also struggle with self-esteem or develop coping mechanisms that can be considered harmful. And so it is important for us to note that these responses vary between different individuals and that healing is not linear, meaning that it is not a straight process. It's a steady path where you just keep getting better in a process.
Tashkana, how do we help somebody? Because you mentioned that, to break down the stigma, open up conversations, so persons can feel more open to discussing. But how do we help somebody who is not speaking up? Yeah, what are some behavioral or emotional signs, some telltale signs that can indicate that somebody may need help?
Alright, so that's a good question. So some signs that would indicate that somebody has experienced sexual abuse is withdrawal or isolation. You see that things that they would like to do, for example, play sports or go out with their friends, they're no longer doing that. They'd rather stay at home. If you're trying to get in touch with them, you're not really getting them. Then you'll see that they're not a fan of physical touch. So whether you touch them or if you try to hug them, you see that they will flinch out of fear. And sometimes this is especially if survivors, if their abuser is a friend or a family member, at the mention of their name, you see a sudden sign of fear across their face. And for survivors who are students or maybe workers, you see that hey, there's a decline in their grades and their participation in class. Or if they go to work, you see that there's a decline in the quality of work. So if Suzette would normally give her report right on time, 10 o'clock, you'll see that you'll have to call her at least 2 days um, later to say, where's the report? You see that there's a decline. And for you to help them, you cannot push them. Do not force them, because when you force them, you're basically pushing them back into isolation. You'll have to allow them to come out and to speak up in their own time. What you can do is be empathetic with them. Do not ask them too many questions. Do not ask them, oh, what did you do? Why you didn't do this? No, you're going to allow them to feel guilty about what happened to them, which should also be a sense like you're blaming them, victim blaming, which is very high in Jamaica.
Okay. All right. So still on this topic, persons not willing to speak up. It maybe even became things that persons are talking about, but the victim, and without the report, then I hear that it's a little bit more difficult for the police to act. But why do you think so many victims of sexual abuse choose not to speak up or not to report what is happening to them, Sasha?
Okay, so there are several reasons why victims may not want to speak up. Concepts like these are considered taboo, especially in Jamaica. And one of the major factors why they would not want to speak up would be fear. Fear can be crippling. They might be fearful of not being believed, fear of retaliation, fear of being blamed for the act, when really and truly it is not their fault. It is never your fault. It can stem from shame and stigma. And, especially in cultures where these issues are not openly discussed. Because I believe that the more that we speak on these topics, the more they will be comfortable to report it and to speak about it. And so if the perpetrator is someone that they trust, someone that they know, a family member, a close relative, a friend, it can also create confusion and emotional conflict. And trauma itself can also affect their memory and their decision making, and that can make it harder to process and to report the experience immediately.
All right, thank you. Tashconnor, so healing process. Let's talk about healing. What role do you think counseling and family support and community support and everything, those systems play?
Alright, so they play a very important role in the healing process. So we'll touch on each of them individually. So for counseling, it provides a safe place which is free from judgment, which will help victims to express repressed emotion and help them gradually work through the trauma. And in counseling session, you will have to utilize different therapies. One that can be used is the trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. This is a branch of CBT, and this is mainly used for survivors who are children, and they might have developed PTSD, as Ms. Scott mentioned, depression or anxiety due to different forms of trauma. In this case, it would be sexual trauma. So by utilizing therapies in the counseling session, it will help the survivor to reshape their negative thinking. So it will reduce their feeling of guilt and help them to manage these feelings of anxiety and fear by teaching them healthy coping techniques that they can use in the session and at home. For the family support, it allows them to feel seen, which is very important, loved and cherished despite what has happened to them. It's the same for the community support. And when the community supports you, it helps to reduce the stigma and make the survivor feel comfortable to speak up and to access help without fear of being blamed. So having a support system is like a guiding light in a dark tunnel. So this basically helps you on your journey and supports you when you reach a dark patch.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk some practical steps this afternoon, ladies. What are some practical steps that individuals and families and schools and communities can take to help to prevent sexual abuse and to raise awareness? I'll leave this open. Both of you can answer.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead with first, Miss Scott. So this is basically a really good question, and this is a question everybody should actually ask themselves. What steps can I personally take to help prevent sexual abuse and raise awareness? So firstly, we have to become aware of what sexual violence is and the different forms. Oftentimes, when we hear about sexual violence, what do we normally think about? Rape. But it is more than that because they have various forms. One is stealthing. Many of you are not aware of that. I wasn't aware of it until I did some research. That's when you're having intercourse with a male and he would remove the condom without your consent. Many females are victims of this, but they're not aware of what it is. So we can firstly become aware of what sexual violence is and then share it with our friends and family members. Then we can speak up and call out harmful behaviors. Do not remain silent when you see someone is being sexually violated, even if it's by your friend or your family member. And report the abuser. Don't feel afraid to report them because this will reduce the number of abusers in our nation. Then we can have sessions with the young people, maybe at school or church, even with the older generation, right? So create a safe space which is free from judgment and always uphold confidentiality. Do not go around and spread what was entrusted to you. Then in the schools, you can have awareness campaigns. Invite organizations such as the Bureau of Gender Affairs, Jamaica Family Planning Association, SISOCA, even the Association of Social Workers. They are free. You can send them an email or call them, ask them to come in and speak to the children, speak to the older generation. And we shouldn't only do this in April because sexual violence is not limited to April. It happens every single day. So have continuous sessions so that we can further spread awareness.
All right, thank you. Sasha, any practical steps from you?
Okay, thank you very much. So I believe that the most important thing right here is education. Prevention starts with being educated about the topic. Individuals can learn and promote clear concepts of consent, respect, and boundaries because I believe these are very important, especially consent. Give consent. If you don't give consent, it is wrong. It is wrong. Families are supposed to create open, safe spaces where their children feel comfortable speaking about their experiences without being fearful. I think in Jamaica, parents are not open to talking about certain things with their children. And so parents are supposed to create a space where their children can come to them and say, Mommy, this happened. Daddy, this happened. And, it won't pose an argument, but they will take action. They're not just going to sit and listen, but they take action. The schools as well can implement age-appropriate education on consent and healthy relationships, as well as clear policies and reporting systems. It's also important to encourage the bystander intervention, where we teach people how to safely step in or seek help when they are seeing concerning situations. Because sometimes we might see it happening to somebody else and we feel as though because it's not somebody that we know or because we're not the person in the position, we're not supposed to speak on it. But if you see something that is happening to somebody and it is wrong and you know they didn't give consent to it, speak on it and get help for the person. And ultimately, prevention requires a collective effort to challenge harmful norms and to promote a culture of respect and accountability.
All right, thank you very much, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls. Hopefully you're listening. I like that it begins with education as we try to do our part here on NCU FM. I hope that our aim as it relates to spreading awareness can really help as we get the education out there. Let me say thank you this afternoon to Miss Sasha Scott and Miss Tashconnor Roach for joining us as we have this discussion. Thank you.